the final tonight. And the best team in baseball wins it all in 2018.
For the first hit. Rutschman into right field. Down the line. A fair ball. Adley will turn first. Head for second. He's going to turn second. Go for third. Rutschman into third base standing. An extra base hit. His first hit in the major leagues. Welcome to the...
Those are long pitch innings. I think Blister, that's what you want to make sure.
Here's a high fly ball into right. Back his bat's on the move. On the track. He's got it. What a catch by Mookie Betts.
Now, Clifford looking for a clean inning here in the seventh. Hit well out to right center field. Jones still on the move, running out of room, and he made it! Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Ballpark. As always, I'm your host, Patrick Moran. We got another great guest today as we get back on the show from the hiatus. We got Noah Kravitz in the house. Noah, we appreciate you taking the time and to come on the show.
Oh, of course. I'm ready to get talking about some, all-star game. We got trade deadline talks going. We got a lot of things to talk about. It'll be cool to see what goes on.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the greatest time of the year for baseball or creators and talking about the trade deadline.
Well, but this is baseball's biggest or baseball fans' favorite holiday.
I know the trade deadline. Yeah, I believe it's like July 30th or 31st.
It's July 30th, so it is a week from now.
Okay, wow. So we already got a week. Should be very interesting to see who's moved, and obviously it's a little bit of a different market on the National League side, considering that a lot of the teams are just kind of in a mid-off. So it'll be really interesting what teams can kind of separate themselves with these next few games. But we'll hit on the All-Star game first. So you're a Nationals fan, and you guys had C.J. Abrams. That was your only All-Star game representative.
Actually, Kyle Finnegan actually at the last minute was selected on Sunday.
What? How did I miss that?
No, he was at the All-Star game. He replaced Ryan Helsley.
Oh, okay.
He was injured.
Okay. So we got two Nationals.
Got two Nationals.
Kyle Finnegan and C.J. Abrams. I got to watch 5, which was very refreshing. How much did you kind of tune in to All-Star Week as a fan?
So, I feel like as a Nats fan, where the team is they're not in a bad situation, but obviously haven't been competing for the last few years. So I haven't been really paying the best attention, but obviously this year, which has looked a lot different compared to the last few years with the rebuild kind of spinning a little faster in the process. You could see the light at the end of the tunnel, as general manager Mike Rizzo would say, but it was definitely intriguing to see Abrams kind of be with those types of guys, Ellie De La Cruz, Teoscar Hernandez, all those big dogs in baseball. And it just feels good as a Nats fan to see that some of the young guys that you love on your team that are really young and still kind of trying to find their place. Abrams has had a really, really good year, and I'm really excited to see how he pans out. He turns out he's been playing really, really well. And even though Kyle Finnegan, who didn't get a chance to play in the All-Star game, it was good to see him at least be a part of the conversation of All-Star relievers, So it was just really, really good to see that.
Absolutely. I mean, kind of some of the highlights from that game were the Paul Skeens inning. That was pretty highly anticipated, I would say, around the league, and I don't think he disappointed. I mean, he had one scoreless inning, and then obviously you had Jarren Duran with the go-ahead 2-run home to push the American League to win that game, and he got All-Star Game MVP. So I would definitely say those were some good highlights from that game.
I do think I want to touch on Skeens for a little bit, because this has just kind of caught my eye a lot. I have different views on this, and this isn't just about the All-Star game specifically, just about Skeens and just how baseball is really transitioning to another level. There's a decent chance that Skeens is only going to be at his best for only 5 to 6 years. And that, as a big Skeens fan, not a Pirates fan, my dad actually happens to be a Pirates fan, which is why I've gotten to know a lot about the Pirates. But because of how hard these pitchers are throwing nowadays, it's going to be interesting to see how not just Skeens, but the Pirates pitching staff in general kind of coaches him and makes his arm as durable as they can, especially because they are in the postseason race. They're in the wild card race right now. They may buy the trade deadline. So it's just, I don't know what else to say. Skeens has really taken baseball by storm, and it'll be interesting to see what goes on from there.
For sure. I mean, but you also got to consider that Paul Skeens is probably the best conditioned pitcher. Like, he has kept himself in incredible physical shape, and he has really taken advantage of kind of the new age of baseball. And
that's true. That's true. And you actually brought up my point there that I wanted to discuss.
Mhm.
There's a lot more pitching injuries, and that just brings up in my mind, like, even though Skeens, he's taken the league by storm. He's awesome. He's one of the best pitchers, maybe the best pitcher in baseball, with a 6.0 ERA, 6.0 record, and a under 2 ERA. I just really, really hope for the best, because I remind myself of guys like Steven Strasburg, who used to throw so hard and has had Tommy John multiple times and had a season-ending, a career-ending injury, TOS, thoracic outlet syndrome.
Yeah.
So that just makes me think, like, is Skeens going to be able to pitch not just during his prime, but when he gets a lot older and he's going to want to compete for multiple championships? Because I don't see the Pirates being able to keep a guy like this, at least from my perspective, from like a financial perspective. The Pirates are not the big dogs in terms of money spending in free agency. Like, you would agree with me. You're an Orioles fan.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Orioles haven't spent a lot of money, or really anything, in the offseason as far as free agency signings go. So it would be tough for the Pirates to keep him. So I think my strategy would kind of max out his full potential now and just go for it.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, like, pitchers are throwing harder than they ever have, and I think that's pretty much the primary reason we're seeing all these pitching injuries. But Paul Skeens, I mean, we haven't seen a talent like this since Steven Strasburg, who we were talking about. I mean, both of those two number one overall picks in their respective drafts out of college, and Paul Skeens is just, I mean, he's kind of on a different level, and he didn't make the opening day roster, but still starting the All-Star game after, I think, 10 or 11 starts is pretty remarkable. So I don't think he had a strikeout, but scoreless frame still pretty good.
I mean, yeah, you'll take anything you get. I just think that obviously these types of pitchers have stuff. They have great stuff to throw, but Skeens is just, I'd say, from a physique perspective, at 6'6", and has maybe the best slider I've seen in a long time at 94 miles an hour. Just think about that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I mean, yeah.
It's wild. I mean, he was kind of a 2-3 pitch pitcher coming out of LSU, and now he's added so many pitches to the repertoire. He's got some minor league time. We'll hit on the home run derby real quick before we get the trade deadline content, which is obviously the best content ever for us. So it kind of felt like a dud of a derby. I don't think it was very exciting, and I felt like the new rules and just kind of tinkering around with it. It's gonna be keep changing, I think, but I don't know. It wasn't that great of a derby. I don't think.
And it's not just the home run derby. I feel like it's just the game of baseball is really evolving to kind of this more analytic view kind of thing, and it's like, obviously the pitch clock, the bigger bases, the shift band, like, those are all big changes. And obviously the derby, it's not, it's great for the fans, it's great for the entertainment, I like it, but this year specifically just wasn't it for me. The new rules, I would say, if there weren't any new specific kind of rules, like, there's a pitch limit, there's a bigger like emphasis on the time limit. Obviously, there was a few years ago with the regular home run derby, but it just it kind of took out the fun. And I mean, props to Teoscar Hernandez. He won.
Yeah.
And got the $1 million bonus. So good for him. But just really wasn't at the level that I feel like people were expecting, I'd say.
Yeah, I don't think so. And obviously, not this is directly the Derby, but a horrible national anthem, which is a story for another day. We won't get too deep into that. I mean, that is very controversial on many levels. I don't think I heard a single positive review, and watching it myself was pretty brutal. So
don't get me started. Don't get me started.
yeah, I mean, we could have a whole rant about that in itself, but now it is trade deadline time. It's the most wonderful time of the year for baseball fans.
Here we go. It's paradise.
It is paradise, and we're only a week out, like we said in the intro. So, now where are we going to start with this trade deadline? It kind of feels like it's going to be a thin market relatively.
I actually would disagree. I think that you're looking at a seller's market, and teams like the Athletics and the White Sox are kind of the teams that I'm looking at that could really benefit from kind of kickstarting into the rebuild that those teams desperately need to start because they have such good players. I want to talk about the White Sox because they just interest me a lot.
Yeah.
They have great players, but the team is just not where it needs to be right now. They don't want to keep losing, and I don't blame them. How do you put your team in the best position to win a World Series sooner? You trade your best players for maximum talent. Garrett Crochet, Luis Robert, maybe even Eric Fetty. Those three players, I'm not saying you put them into it one single trade, but you kind of have to max out those players' values right now. And this reminds me a lot of the Juan Soto situation. Obviously, at the time, Soto was probably the best hitter in baseball.
Yep.
I think he was in the MVP race. Obviously, a Nats team that was terrible. And you're looking at a White Sox team that's terrible. And obviously, Luis Robert's not on the same level as Juan Soto was in 2022. But Garrett Crochet, probably outside of Paul Skeens, is one of the best pitchers in baseball.
Yep.
So I'm looking at a really good situation for the White Sox where they can max out their values right now. I mean, I don't know your opinion, Pat, but if I'm looking at a team that wants to win the World Series, I'm looking at the Dodgers to trade for Luis Robert and Garrett Crochet because they have the prospects, they have the talent to help the White Sox kickstart into a fast rebuild.
Yeah, I think if you're the White Sox, you kind of have to look at the bigger or teams with better farm systems just because they're going to have more to offer you. And I think the interesting part about Crochet is that he might hit a wall. I mean, like, we haven't really seen him throw more than 60 innings like this since his college career at Tennessee, but it's going to be really interesting how it's handled. I mean, he's already at the 100 inning mark. There's only so many miles on that arm considering he just became a starting pitcher this spring training, so it's probably the most high risk, high reward arm we're ever going to see moved, I think.
It's a high risk. I think that, I mean, from a player's perspective, I think that the social situation in the White Sox, he's having a great time. Obviously, they are losing a lot of games, but he's learning a lot. And obviously, who could care less about record nowadays? He's 6-6, but he has a 3 ERA, and he's one of the best whips in baseball. So I look at that, and I just look at a team who's competing, who can max out the value. And obviously, we haven't really seen him other than this year. So there is a part of me that's like, okay, well, pause for a sec. Is this the player that we're willing to give up our best prospects for? On the other hand, Luis Robert, who has been in the league for a decent amount of time, but hasn't really, obviously great player. Love the kid. Can hit home runs. Great fielder in the outfield. I think he needs to go to a place that can be best positioned for him to win. I think that in a team, and just specifically for the White Sox best interest, like the Nationals did with Soto, they added Josh Bell into the trade and extracted another really, really good prospect, which they kind of focus the Soto deal on a lot that not a lot of people understand. A lot of people would look at James Wood as the guy who's the center of the deal, whereas if Bell wasn't in the deal, it was going to be C.J. Abrams, Robert Hassel, James Wood, and Mackenzie Gore. It was just those 4 players. And they were able to extract Harlan Suzana, who they feel really, really confident in. And that's how they were able to get him. So I look at this situation for the Dodgers and White Sox, where if the Dodgers want, or if the White Sox want a specific prospect in the Dodgers system, I look at River Ryan, who, young pitcher, could make a really, really big impact. That could be a piece that the White Sox could build around. And if you want him, not just him, but if you want other players, you need to package Robert and Crochet, maybe even Eric Fetty if you want an even larger deal, and kind of kickstart a rebuild like the Nationals did.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, like, the Dodgers are probably in the best position to get the package of Crochet and Robert. And, the Orioles, I think, are the top team to get Crochet himself. But you look at it, the Orioles don't need a bat. They don't need Luis Robert. So if you're looking for a team that wants the duo, they want the full package, they want the arm and the bat, the Dodgers, I think, are as good of a team as anybody. They were my second team. I think Crochet to the Orioles makes a lot of sense, but I think Orioles, Dodgers, Padres, probably the top 3 teams to go after Crochet. Those are 3 really good systems, and you could certainly pluck kind of whoever you want if you're able to.
And I also look at the Blue Jays as a potential team. Even actually, I said that wrong. I do think that the Orioles are in a position where I look at the 3 teams in baseball that are kind of the big dogs, right? The juggernauts of baseball. It's the Orioles, it's the Phillies, and it's the Dodgers. It's those 3 teams. And I look at kind of just where the Orioles are. They don't have a lot of veterans that come to my mind that could really help a lot of these young guys. Even though the young guys, they've been great. It's Henderson, it's Rutschman, it's Westberg, excuse my language. There's a lot of young guys on this team, and they're in a good situation. But I'm all for them getting a veteran this deadline, whoever that may be. I don't have a specific name that comes to mind. You probably have an idea of who that could be. But it's just for me to kind of put the Orioles in the World Series contention area, which I still think they could be, but I think that they need to get a solid veteran, whether that be a pitcher, whether that be a bat, whether that be even a relief pitcher. They need a guy who could help the locker room and really be a big impact.
I think so. I mean, unfortunately, if he was healthy and pitching well, Jesus Luzardo, I think, would probably be the best arm moved. I mean, Crochet is probably higher upside, but you look at Luzardo, he's got the miles on the arm that Crochet does not. I think that would have been a pretty easy target for a lot of contending teams, if he was healthy, but unfortunately he's not. So it's really going to be Crochet setting the market if you really look at it. Maybe not from a pitching perspective, but just from a whole player perspective. And obviously bats are not as common to be moved, I think, at the major league level, but Crochet is really, I think, the talent is through the roof.
And I think that when you look at what kind of league are we in? Are we in a more offensive league, or are we in a more kind of like a pitching based? This is a more offensive based league. Teams are scoring runs, and it's harder to come by really like significantly impactful pitchers. That's why I look at the Pirates. They struck gold in the draft lottery and took arguably baseball's best pitcher we've seen in some time. So they're definitely in a good spot. And you bring up the Orioles again. The Orioles are a team that, obviously, it's a great pitching staff. But if you want to win the World Series, you want to be one of the best teams in baseball, you need pitching that can get you through some of the best lineups in baseball. Phillies, Dodgers. I put the Yankees in that conversation as well. That's why I just think Crochet makes a lot of sense for the Orioles. And even Tarek Skubal, who according to John Morassi, he's unavailable. Yet one of the Tigers scouts apparently visited AAA Norfolk and apparently watched an Orioles game, a AAA Orioles game affiliate. Jackson Holiday, Colby Mayo, Connor Norby, Kyle Stowers, those are kind of the names that were at least discussed. But in terms of a potential trade, which will be absolutely monumental, but I look at the teams that if this was an actual sweepstake where Tarek Skubal is on the market, the only team, and you could agree with me on this, Pat, the only team that can physically make a Tarek Skubal trade is the Baltimore Orioles because they have the prospects and they have the guys who the Tigers would foresee as future All-Stars.
For sure. I mean, I kind of had Tariq Skubal in my tweener category. Is he available? Is he not available? I mean, you really got to move the sun and the moon for a guy like that. I mean, Tariq Skubal he's arguably the best pitcher in the game. He could win the AL Cy Young when it's all said and done. And really, like you said, the only team that's capable of making that move is Baltimore. I mean, the Baltimore system is so deep. I know it well. I mean, I'm an Orioles fan, so I mean, you got three golden childs in that system. You have Holiday, you have Basayo, and Mayo. Those are three franchise cornerstone caliber players, and I don't think any other organization can say that ever, which is really unique. And it puts you in a great spot if you're the Orioles. I mean, they have the trade market at the palm of their hand. They could go do whatever they want to do. So, I mean, I'm thinking of this like if you have a trade package of Norby, Stowers, and Beavers, that's getting you a starting pitcher, and the system's not feeling that, which is just wild.
I mean, yeah, you bring up Norby, you bring up Mayo, you bring up Holiday, the franchise, kind of the franchise cornerstones and whatnot. These are the players that could potentially kickstart a team that's really struggling, but in the next few years could be those teams' best players. That's why I kind of overcomplicate the National Soto trade back in 2022 a little bit much because it was just so significant at the time that we didn't even know where the Nationals would end up in 2024. In 2023, the Nationals had a 16-game improvement from 2022, 55 wins in 2022, 71 in 2023. And this year, before the All-Star break, had 44 wins, which is the most, I think, since 2019 first, but post All-Star break. So that to me just makes me think that when you extract guys in trades, these are the players that you're going to build around. The Nationals have built around Abrams. They built around Mackenzie Gore. Hell, James Wood is making an incredible impact. Had a 3-run homer the other day, which won the Nats the game. So I look at the Orioles in a great spot to make a significant move. And even if it doesn't really work out in their best interest, fine, you gave up 2 prospects, maybe 3, who could be really, really good on another team. But guess what? You still have Basayo, you still have Holiday, and you still have a decent amount of prospects in your system. So, and I know you would agree with me on that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've seen so many glorious prospects. Now, granted, it was a tough road to get there, but it is worth it when it's all said and done. I mean, we've never seen a farm system like this. Kind of one thing in the Orioles, my big question is, so the system's known for bats. Would they trade pitching? I mean, they have the top 2 ranked pitching prospects in the system are Chase McDermott and Cade Povich, who both came over in the 2022 trade deadline for Jorge Lopez and Trey Mancini, 2 different deals. And both of them have shown great stuff in AAA Norfolk. Povich has obviously been up with the big league club. And McDermott, I've heard reports that he's on the taxi squad, and he's in Miami. So, I mean, I've seen Povich and McDermott tossed around in trades, but what is kind of your opinion on the Orioles moving pitching in such a hitting heavy system?
So here's my opinion. I really don't think it would be in their best interest to trade these specific guys. If you're talking about McDermott and Povich specifically, no, because they are major league ready. Yep. They can make an impact now, and you want to see what they can do, obviously on a competing team like the Orioles are. I would be more hesitant to trade your pitching
Yeah.
and kind of trade your bats for even more pitching, right? I bring this up again, Mayo and Norby, you know, I look at Crochet, even Mason Miller on the Athletics, who is still young, can throw, even though he's not a starting pitcher, potentially could be in the future. I know he's the closer right now. Obviously, over time, that's going to be Felix's job for the Orioles. That's already known. But could Mason Miller be a cornerstone piece? Maybe in this bullpen, maybe an eighth inning starter guy, and then potentially a starter. So if you were asking me, all in all, I would not trade McDermott. I would not trade Povich. And if it were up to me, you put guys like Mayo and Norby on the block. Keep guys like Basayo and Bradfield, because those guys could be really nice players to see in the future.
For sure. And I mean, like, when you're talking about trading pitching away, we've seen the Dodgers. I'll just use an example. Like, the Dodgers have a lot of major league ready starters. Now, granted, they're not, aces or twos, and they're not going to be at the helm of any rotation. But, right, you're seeing guys like Kyle Hurt come up. You're seeing guys like River Ryan come up. We saw Emmett Sheehan last year, Gavin Stone. Those are all prized pitching prospects, or once prized pitching prospects, and they've all come up and made their major league debut with the Dodgers. So it really kind of tells you can never have too much pitching, and it kind of ties in with the Skeens point. Like, I mean, like, the pitching injuries are just, it feels like they're a lot more prominent than they ever have been this year. So I think when you look at the grand scheme of things, I think it'd be smart to hold on to pitching.
No doubt. It's pitching. In my experience, you could have the best offense in the world. You could have Aaron Judge in your lineup. You could have Juan Soto. You could have Mookie Betts. If you don't have quality pitching, you're not going anywhere. And I've learned that from a Nats team that had really bad pitching in 2022. But obviously, Soto was the best hitter in baseball and was keeping us in the game. And you can't do that when your pitching is really, really sus. Even though your hitting's really, really good, you need pitching to be the backbone of your team. And that's what I see with the Orioles. I think that it was significant to see them trade for Burns the day after Dave Rubenstein bought the team. I'm not a Nose fan, but that made me feel good about where the team was at that moment. And looking at it right now, Corbin Burns is competing for a Cy Young award. So,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, those were probably the two greatest days of my Orioles fandom life. So, that's certainly there. Speaking of the Nationals, we'll kind of touch on the Nationals. The Nationals are selling, I think. The Nationals not quite there. We're seeing young guys come up. James Wood made his debut. He's been great. C.J. Abrams is really coming to his own. Mackenzie Gore is a really nice piece in the rotation as well. He looks like he's a starter of the future. I think two guys I had on my list that you can look to move if you're the Nationals are Jesse Winker and Kyle Finnegan. I mean, we'll start with Finnegan just because, you move. I think at the end of the day, you just got to move relievers. I think it's that straightforward. I think it's that simple. The reliever, market and just the reliever position as a whole is so fluid and so volatile. So I think you really got to sell high on any relievers. And I'll just use an example. Jorge Lopez in 2022 was an all-star closer and kind of falls off a cliff from there after being traded. So, what are kind of your thoughts on Kyle Finnegan possibly being moved?
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's like where the Nats have the upper hand, I feel like, in a lot of trade talks. It's hard to come by with really dominant relief pitching. And I'll just say this. Kyle Finnegan at this point in 2021 and 2022 might have been the Nationals' worst relief pitcher. And that's not exaggerating. And I'm not saying that just to drop up the value of him, but he was one of the worst pitchers in one of the worst relief pitchers in 2022. He had bad control, obviously had the stuff. He had the fastball. It could touch 100, just couldn't get it in the strike zone. I feel like this year specifically, he's worked on the fundamental things of being not just a relief pitcher, but a dominant closer in baseball. You need the fastball. You need the off speed. You need the command. You need the mechanics. He's worked on all of that. I piece it all together and I look at a potential trade chip for the Nationals. And this is a scenario where I've kind of gone back and forth. Oh, I felt like, we should definitely trade him for max value. No, we should keep him because he's really, really good. And I've come to the conclusion that I feel like in the Nationals' best interest, I want to keep him. I want to keep the guy who could be your backbone of the bullpen, could save a game for you, and could get you a lot more wins than you could even think of. He has 29 saves already this year. That might be major league leading, I feel like. But obviously, I could see your point in trading him for max value, like a lot of good prospects, some major league ready players or players already in the major leagues. But he's 32 years old, one of the best ERAs among relief pitchers, one of the best arms. I think his entertainment, his value to the city would make a trade really, really difficult. And I guess I'm saying this just because I'm a Nats fan. Maybe I'm biased, but he's become such a big piece in this bullpen, and not just this bullpen, but for the team. He's become such a great player and a great player to rely on. It would be hard for me to see him go, but I would not be surprised if he does get moved just because of the amount of value that he brings to a team. I look at the Orioles. The Orioles need relief pitching. I look at, and I know that, we could talk about this from your perspective about guys who maybe the Orioles could trade for, a Kyle Finnegan. Would you like to, who would, let me ask you this. Who do you think, if it were up to you, which, let's say 3 prospects.
3.
That you're giving for Kyle Finnegan?
I want to say Norby, but I feel like that's a bit much at the end of the day.
What if you add Lane Thomas or Jesse Winker in the deal? Do you think that could extract maybe Mayo or Norby? One of those two, you'd think?
I think in the Orioles scenario, no, I don't. I personally think, as an Orioles fan, like, we don't need bats. We have enough bats as this.
That's right. That's right.
we really got to start trading some of these guys. I mean, we kind of have, I think, if he had the opportunity, of Jesse Winker at home and Kyle Stowers. I mean, Kyle Stowers is just blocked beyond his years, and I feel so bad for him. I think Finnegan for Stowers and Norby and maybe like a filler prospect could probably get it done.
I don't disagree with that. I think that, obviously this brings back up to the point where I'm a Nationals fan and I don't even want to trade Kyle Finnegan. But on the other hand, it makes sense because you're extracting significant value and more added on depth in your farm system. But I also bring up the point where the Nats are not even far from contention. I know that might be oversaying it a little bit, but just think about where they were. They started the rebuild in 2021. You trade Scherzer, you trade Turner, you trade Daniel Hudson, Kyle Schwarber, who had a monumental month of June in 2021. And then you trade Soto the year later. They've won 55 games in 2022, 16-game improvement. And now I feel like they're really starting to find their identity. I think that I think Finnegan is a part of that identity. Obviously, Abrams and Gore and James Wood. But Kyle Finnegan should be right in the mix. And I think that this is a player you need to seriously consider thinking about what you're doing here. Do you think it's best to move on from him and kind of add on a little more years, maybe another year on your rebuild where you don't have your best relief pitcher, you don't have the best closer in baseball? Or could you trade guys on expiring contracts like Jesse Winker, like Trevor Williams, like Dylan Floro, not get like significant names, like significant prospects in baseball, but kind of some kind of mid-tier, like kind of top 10 prospects, maybe 8, 9, or 10 in the system. It could still be big depth in your farm system while having enough money to spend for free agency next year and kind of going for it in 2025.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if the Nationals, you have to move Winker. I think there's
no doubt
about that. I mean, you sign him to a minor league deal. He's cheap. It's like, it feels like the Jeimer Candelario conversation of last year, where you signed Candelario, kind of a prove it deal. It was a major league deal, so it's a little bit different than Winker. But I think Winker is just, you got to move Winker. He's not coming back. You're not re-signing him either.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I kind of feel like that's another thing to think about. Jeimer Candelario, $5 million, 1 year. that was kind of a prove it deal, kind of see where he can improve, and then you trade him for max value. That's kind of the trade that I see could happening. Yet Jesse Winker has played a lot. I think 2020, you could agree with me on this, that 2024 Jesse Winker is a lot better than 2023 Jeimer Candelario. Like, I
Yeah,
think that
probably.
I think Winker could extract you a lot more than just a DJ Hers last year, where DJ
Yeah.
Hers could be a decent piece in this Nets rotation. So, and the Candelario part of the deal for the Cubs didn't work out. They didn't make the playoffs, and he had actually, I think believe it or not, he had 8 hits in his first 9 at bats as a Cub, and then literally nothing else. So that's kind of the deal I foresee for Winker. But I mean, tell me what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think Winker, it kind of depends for Winker. Like, he is cheaper, so I don't know if that really drives up the value or lowers the value, and he's it's a rental. I think I think you just have to move him. I mean, he's got an 813 OPS. Someone's gonna come calling about that. I don't know who it's gonna be, but I can see teams like a Diamondbacks, or no, not Diamondbacks, Pirates, or Phillies or Guardians, kind of teams that just want insurance bats, and that's where Winker could really shine.
Yeah, you bring up the Pirates. They're not that far away from like really making a big statement in the National League. They have the elite pitching. And yes, their pitching is elite. It's Paul Skeens, it's Mitch Keller, Jared Jones. Yes, he's hurt, but when healthy, this might be the best rotation in baseball in my mind. And I think that the one thing holding them back is their offense. Even
Yeah.
if they add just a decent outfielder, because they are left-handed heavy. So I look at if you're the Nationals and you are trying to make a deal with the Pirates, who have a good farm system, Lane Thomas is a guy that fits the needs of the Pirates right now. They're not right-handed heavy, and he could plug in right into that right field spot, move Connor Joe over to left, actually move Connor Joe to center. You put Michael Taylor on your bench and keep Reynolds in left, and there you have it. You have a lineup that has many stars. You have Brian Reynolds, you have Lane Thomas, you have O'Neal Cruz. I think those 3 players could be enough to give some teams fits in games, especially come September when you're really, really fighting on the line for a wild card spot, which I foresee the Pirates doing.
For sure. I mean, I think the Pirates should try and get a few bats here and there because, I mean, Skeens, Jones, Keller. Right now, you have to maximize that front 3 because it's a really good front 3 at the end of the day. I mean, I'm a big Jaron Jones fan. I mean, he's kind of he can be a Spencer Strider-esque with just the high fastball at the top of the zone, and then Skeens is Paul Skeens. We already talked about that, so we'll kind of move on to some other teams and players before we kind of get into the maybe category. Well, let's talk about the A's. I think the A's have some good pieces. I mean, like, you have a Brent Rooker, you have Mason Miller, you have a Paul Blackburn. What can the Orioles do or not the Orioles, what can the A's do with those 3 guys?
I think that there's going to be some strategic thinking going on here. I think that they're going to be more kind of hesitant to trade Miller because of how dominant he's been. He's one of the best closers in baseball. And believe it or not, I put him ahead of Kyle Finnegan if it were me. And it's not just the playing title, but I actually bring up a tweet that I read the other day saying that and I quote, an MLB executive has said that it would take a Herschel Walker type trade for any team convince Oakland to trade Mason Miller, who, by the way, is under control till 2029.
Yeah.
That's 5 more seasons.
It's a lot of control.
That's a lot of control. So I look at Miller as a guy that they're likely not going to move. But I look at a guy like Brent Rooker, who he was an all-star last year, 29 years old. He's playing well. That's a guy I think they could trade. They could trade him for max value. And I think that I actually do look at the Pirates as a team, even though I think Rooker is a lefty. Is he a lefty?
Righty.
He is a righty. And yeah, that benefits the Pirates a lot. I bring that up with Lane Thomas where they need a right-handed bat. Brent Rooker could fit that. I think that that could make sense for the Pirates. But in terms of where the A's are right now, it wouldn't make sense to keep Miller unless you get an offer that you just cannot refuse. That you cannot refuse. Like, it could be even bigger than the Juan Soto trade if it were me. Like, I feel like, okay, that might be a little overstating it, but Mason Miller is top notch. One of the best arms I've seen in a long time. Closer, can touch 102. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're the A's, you don't have to move Miller just because of the control and
You're not under pressure. Like, there's no pressure.
yeah, there's no pressure there. So we'll kind of move to the tier 2 of the trade deadline. I had a few names written down. I think Tommy Pham's in that tier. I think Eric Fetty's in that tier. I think Jazz Chisholm's in that tier. Tanner Scott, Jack Flaherty. So yeah, I mean, what are kind of your thoughts on those names and what could happen with them?
So actually, believe it or not, I actually did want to bring up Jazz Chisholm. Chisholm's a guy who I look at as obviously extremely athletic, great in center field, great offense. I think, believe it or not, if it were up to me, he's a guy that I would put in tier 1 of the trade deadline. And
I think talent-wise, you could argue that.
I think talent-wise, yes. Chisholm could really extract you a lot of really fond and great baseball players. I think that if you're in the Marlins situation, you're not doing good, you kind of need to kickstart another rebuild. And I talked about this with the White Sox. I actually put Josh Bell not in the tier 1 trade category, but also another guy that they could trade, another veteran. I look at Chisholm as a guy they can extract for max value. I think teams like the Yankees make sense. I think that the Mariners make sense, and potentially the Pirates. Because
I was going to say Phillies.
Phillies actually would make a lot of sense, believe it or not. I think that
in division though, so
it is in the division, so that would but that would benefit the Marlins because that will allow them to strike value and get a lot more and potentially overvalue him than enough people would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jazz Chisholm, it's a very polarizing profile, I think, because you can argue that the talent is, first tier. You can argue talent-wise that he's a first-tier trade candidate.
Yeah.
But I think right now in what he's shown, he's kind of more of a second tier. So, now I'll go into the maybe trade category.
Mm-hmm.
So these are kind of some tweener teams that are gonna have to make some decisions. I put, Andrew Heaney / Nathan Eovaldi, kind of that tandem. David Robertson / Kirby Yates. I mean, the Rangers are just in a really interesting spot.
Oh,
Pete
yeah.
Alonso of the Mets, I put it. I had Tarek Skubal just because, it would really take a haul, and it just seems very unlikely. Cody Bellinger I had in that spot. Jameson Taillon, considering that the Cubs are kind of a tweener as well. And then Carlos Estevez, I mean, he should be traded, but it's the Angels, so it's a whole new perspective there.
Yeah, and I think that I wanted to bring up the Cubs here because I just feel like, and I actually legitimately feel bad. I actually really like where they were over the last few months, but over the last few weeks, they just have not looked great. I think they're going to be on full sell, and I think that believe it or not, a baseball operations man said that they're going to sell. They're going to acquire. They have no plans to acquire rental players, quote, and will be sellers ahead to Tuesday's deadline. And they're going to look at to 2025 because I look at this team and they're not that bad. It's a decent team. They just have not performed well, and they're 3.5 games out of the wild card. So this is kind of surprising me a little bit because I look at a team like the Cubs. They're not bad. They have great building blocks. The system is a little iffy. I do think that their farm system needs work, so that could be another reason to go out and kind of trade some of your big bets and get some really, really good players. I mean, Cade Horton, he is your best prospect, but not really in the big dogs category with like Paul Skeens, James Wood, Jackson Holliday, Dylan Cruz, obviously. I look at Justin Steele as a guy who could be a potential trade candidate. Big deal would have to come though. I also look at Nico Horner. a guy who could be a legitimate contributor to a contending team, and potentially Cody Bellinger. And I believe it or not, I think he is hurt right now, but would take a decent amount to get him, even though he is making a significant amount of money till 2026. But that's just me. I think that the Cubs are a team that could make big moves, not necessarily putting them in the best position to win, but the best position to win next year.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the Cubs just kind of have to do some retooling. There are good players on that team, but they kind of have to reevaluate. And obviously, you said the farm system is not great, so that I do think that needs a little bit of work. We'll do as we wrap up. We'll do one official mock trade. So we'll have one big one. But before that, we'll talk about these two interesting guys that were recently DFA'd. Not it's kind of trade talk, but not really at the same time. Ty
They're
France
still
and
they're still talk worthy. I feel like that
still,
these
still talk worthy.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Ty France and James Paxton. James Paxton was recently DFA'd by the Dodgers. He hadn't been having a great year, but I think he can still be an impact arm somewhere. Whether that's kind of a swingman or 5 and dive guy. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he could kind of be a Swiss Army knife depending on what team gets him, and he can still be helpful. And then Ty France, was an All-Star like in 21 or 2, so it's plenty of intrigue there. And obviously with kind of the thin market for bats, he certainly adds an interesting wrinkle as well.
That's true, and I think that I'm kind of surprised that France hasn't even been picked up yet. Even though he was DFA'd just yesterday, he has not had the best year. I'll say that. Was an All-Star a few years ago. Could still make an impact. He's 30 years old. Could slide into kind of your first base DH platoon role. I look at the Padres as a team that, okay, they're in a position where they can make a big move, and if they don't want to give up their big prospects, they need to kind of go under the radar and get a guy like France who could fill out their first base role. I actually look at the Pirates as a team that could get France. And believe it or not, I think France kind of fits in the scheme for the Pirates a little bit better. They need a right-handed hitter, and I actually am a big fan of Rowdy Tellez and what he's been able to do. Has had a rough first start as a Pirate, but has kind of really found his stride. And even though he has found his stride, you put France in that mold, and you have two legitimate first base contributors for your Pirates team. You got Kai France and Rowdy Tellez, who could start against righties, and France, who could start against lefties. France kills lefties, and Tellez, we obviously know what he can do with the bat. He just hits for power. He hits home runs. France is a little more of a contact hitter, I'd say, can hit the home runs, but you put him in there, get the single, and he can win a game for you. So I think that France would make a ton of sense for the Pirates.
I think so. I mean, you mentioned the Pirates and the Padres. Those are two teams with left-handed hitting first baseman and Jake Cronenworth and Rowdy Tellez. And Ty France could certainly spell those lefty-lefty matchups for those two guys. I think also a team that you didn't mention, the Red Sox. I mean, Casas is hurt right now. If you kind of just want to do a plug and play, if you're Boston, you could roll with the platoon of Dom Smith and Ty France, and I don't think that would be a completely bad option. And then for Paxton, I mean, it's just it's a pitcher, so somebody's gonna get him, and he's gonna be an impact arm one way or another.
That I think you brought up a really interesting point, and if we're gonna get into James Paxton, he's a guy that would make a lot of sense for the Red Sox. I think that they're in a good position to win. Obviously, they're kind of on the outside of the wild card right now. If I take a look, the Red Sox, they're 2 games back. And what have I said before? It's pitching that makes you a lot better. Even though Paxton's kind of on the older side, he can bring the veteran presence. Hasn't really done that this year. He's a 4 ERA, only 64 Ks and around 70 innings, 48 walks. With a rotation that consists of Tanner Houck, Nick Pivetta, Brian Balo, I think you put Paxton in there and kind of maybe transition Kutar, Crawford to maybe the bullpen. You got a decent rotation here, and I think that could be a good spot for Paxton to finish out the year and maybe onto the wild card for them.
For sure. So to round it out here, we will do one official mock trade on this podcast. And you are the guest, so you can choose whoever player that you want to mock a trade for.
So I've really kind of just kept thinking about what a Tarek Skubal trade would look like for the
Mm,
Orioles. And I just think
mm,
that this makes so much sense for the Orioles. You can max out the value. You have the players to kind of kickstart the Tigers into a rebuild.
yeah.
And obviously, from an Orioles perspective, Holiday is obviously untouchable. That is your best prospect. There is no way you're giving him up. And I think that even though you might be really, really high on what Basayo and Norby and Mayo can bring to the table, I think it would have to take 2 out of those 3 players to make a trade. You have to trade 2 of them to really kind of interest the Tigers in making sure that this deal makes sense for them. Obviously makes sense for the Orioles because they're competing right now, but would make sense for the Tigers. So if you could help me out a little bit here, if you could choose between guys like Mayo, Norby, and Basayo,
Mm,
which two are you trading? Which one do you think you're keeping?
Mayo. You said Mayo, Norby, and Pasayo.
Yes.
I think Norby's respectfully to Connor Norby. He's kind of in my opinion, the tier below. I think really the tier one talents for the Orioles are Holiday, Basayo, and Norby. So, I think those 3 guys are really the 3 headliners for this system. You probably do have to give up one of them. So here's an interesting wrinkle. Do we include a reliever in this deal going to Baltimore?
Like from the Tigers side?
Yes.
I think there's a decent opportunity. Yeah, I think that for kind of the Orioles to kind of lessen on just like the big heavy prospects, trade for another reliever, to which you can probably give up a major league player for.
Yeah.
Are there any like current major leaguers on the Orioles that you kind of foresee potentially being a part of this kind of a deal?
I mean, I think the 2 obvious answers are Ramon Urias and Jorge Mateo. I mean, I think from Urias' perspective, he's kind of on the hot seat. Mayo's knocking on his door, ready for that roster spot. I don't think the Orioles are moving Jorge Mateo just because of how dynamic of a player he is, and the speed and defense for Mateo has really endeared himself to the Orioles. So I don't think Jorge Mateo is a guy that could really be on the move, but I think Urias could potentially, if the Tigers are interested, be in that deal because he's a guy that can help you right now, and he kind of has a good glove, and it's really intriguing what possibilities are there.
So if we are talking about putting a trade together, Tigers, Orioles, Skubal trade,
Mm,
I would say we keep Urias in this deal. That could help kind of
yep.
flexing out the value. I would put prob. See, this brings up again. Would you put Stowers in the trade?
I
For the
would. I think Stowers just needs to be moved at this point.
Yeah, I think that would be a good part of the trade. I think I would put Norby in that category. Keep Basayo. We'll see about Mayo in a little bit, but probably Connor Norby.
Hmm.
And then, would you put Heston Kjerstad in the deal? Even though that would be hard as an Orioles fan.
I don't know. I mean, I do think if you're going after Tarek Skubal, you got to give up at least one of Mayo, Basayo, and Holiday. And to be honest, at this point, as interesting as this may sound, I don't think Jackson Holiday is untouchable. I think he's very close to that, and
Really?
I think he's the guy that the Orioles are the most hesitant to move at this point. But I it feels like he's not untouchable. And you
Do
mentioned
you think
earlier the
let me ask
Tigers. The Tigers had a scout in Norfolk, and he saw Holiday and Mayo there.
let me ask you this. Do you
Mm.
think that the Orioles really do consider moving Holiday and then kind of taking guys like Norby and Mayo, or actually taking guys like Basayo and Mayo out of the conversation and including potentially just Holiday and Norby for Skubal?
Um, it's tough. It's tough how you want to
It
maneuver
is
that.
tough. I understand. I understand.
It's tough to evaluate how that could go down. I mean, I think I saw like a mock trade, and it was like, Tarek Skubal and Jason Foley for Jackson Holiday and another piece. I'm not remembering. Um,
Because even though Holiday is still your big dog in the system, you still got
mm,
Mayo. You still got Kirk.
yeah.
Kerstad's not in the system right now, but he's up in the majors and he's still making a decent impact. Mayo's your big dog, and so is Basayo. So it's kind of like a. I mean, you'll keep. I look at Mayo and I look at Basayo, who kind of, when you put them together, do you think those two are better than Holiday, or do you think they could be better than Holiday in the future?
I think they can be. Obviously those are two insane prospects that are going to be ready in the next year or two. I think kind of something to think about, and I this hasn't really been brought up anywhere, but I'm just thinking in my mind, like, you gotta, you're, if you want to keep some of the young talent already at the major league level, right? If you want to try and extend Henderson now, which would probably be damn near impossible,
Yeah.
you could try for Rutschman, you can try for Grayson. Holiday's another Boris client. So if you want to, have young talent locked up on team friendly deals, it's going to be hard. It's hard enough with Henderson, because he's a Boris client, but Holiday is also a Boris client. So it could ease it up financially and down the road if you do move off of Holiday. And, I think if you look at it in a vacuum, like Holiday, Basayo, and Mayo, they're not that far off in terms of talent.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. It would go really, it would be really, really hard to kind of see, especially from the fans' perspective. It would be hard. Do you think it makes sense to move on from Holiday because in the future you're most likely going to be able to keep him for what his contract is right now, which I think is 5 to 6 years for right now, because you're not
Yeah.
going to be able to extend him because he's going to want so much money, and the Orioles haven't proven in the past that they are going to spend money in free agency. But if it were me, and I think I'm gonna take as we'll wrap up very, very soon.
Yep.
If we kind of take Screwball out of this and kind of focus on maybe a Mason Miller trade, who do you think we can put in that conversation for Mason Miller? Because
Okay.
obviously, this could include Holiday because of the amount of control that these guys have, and I know that kind of a 1-for-1 would not make sense. So if it were you, who would you trade for Mason Miller?
I think first of all, if we're moving off of Scooble, I think it would not take as much to get Mason Miller because at the end of the day, he is a reliever, and I know there's a ton of control there, but it's a reliever. I mean, he's pitching 1 inning, so I don't like. I think to be totally honest, you don't have to really move a Holiday, Basayo, or Mayo. I think sheer quantity wise, you could probably get it done with like Norby, Stowers, Beavers, and then maybe another like good piece. You could look like a Horvath or something.
Do you think you'd put a Kerstad in that deal yet, or are you not like as confident of doing that yet?
I really don't know. I mean, Kerstad's such an interesting case. Because he's at the big league level and he's getting sporadic playing time, which is really interesting. But it's you probably would have to include Kerstad, and then you can just plug Stowers in. Obviously, Stowers is not as good as Kerstad, by any stretch, but you're still getting that left-handed hitting corner outfielder. And so you probably do have to include Heston Kerstad in a deal for Mason Miller. Now that you bring that up.
So as of right now, if things stand right where they are, our mock trade of the day for Beyond the Ballpark is Mason Miller to the Baltimore Orioles for Connor Norby, Stowers, who else? Dylan Beavers and Heston Kerstad.
See, the thing is, like, I think the Royal, like, you're not. I don't think you're getting both Kerstad and Stowers if you're Oakland.
That's right. So if it were you, if you're adding a player maybe from the Athletics to the Orioles, who do you think it could be in that conversation?
If it was like if the Athletics were giving up two guys, I think you could put Paul Blackburn in this conversation because Paul Blackburn's a starter, or it was just need starters at this point. I mean,
That's yeah, yeah.
Paul Blackburn, not a high ceiling, probably not your number 3 starter in the playoffs. But it's a helpful arm at the end of the day. Like it's not like you're not gonna have take Paul Blackburn on your team because he can help you as a starter, in the second half.
Yeah, I mean he is injured right now at 30 years old. Still has time. He's only been in the league for 4 years, so he's still he's not necessarily new, but he still got a long way to go, but could be a decent piece. So if it were up to me, and I think hopefully you agree with me,
Yep.
it would be Miller, Blackburn, two great pitchers for Norby, Stowers, the Beavers, and Kerstad. Are you making that deal?
I'm trying to think. You said Norby, Beavers, Kerstad, and you said Stowers?
Yes.
No, I don't. At that point, I don't think Stowers has to be in the deal.
Okay, so if we had to cut somebody from the deal, it'd be Stowers.
Yeah, I mean, because Stowers doesn't have like as much prospect intrigue.
That's true.
Like Stowers, like Norby, has gone stale in AAA, but with the service time of Stowers, like he's not a prospect anymore. Now, granted, Kerstad isn't either, but Kerstad certainly is a more appealing name, I think, if you're making a deal with the Orioles.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you can probably get it done if you're Mason Miller and Paul Blackburn in exchange for Heston Kerstad, Dylan Beavers, and Connor Norby. I think that probably gets it done.
Yeah, that's what I have, and I think that would be a great deal. It really. What do you say?
I was gonna say, like, I don't think the Orioles feel the loss of Kerstad that much. Obviously, it would be a good loss, but you have Stowers right there, so Stowers can just kind of fill in where Kerstad left it.
Yeah, basically,
So,
I think that you fill in a really really big need in pitching, Blackburn, but also not necessarily saying that the Orioles relief pitching is not that great, but it's still decent. And once you get Felix back, you have a duo in your bullpen of Felix Bautista and Mason Miller. Holy cow! I'm just thinking of the possibilities. Me personally.
I mean, yeah, that would be pretty crazy. You face that back into the bullpen, game over, I think.
Oh,
I mean, yeah, if Bautista's healthy, and maybe if you get Miller, like you don't have to put Bautista immediately back into the closer role. You can still kind of ease him in as the setup guy coming off of TJ, and Bautista does have the setup man experience. So, but either way, the back end of the bullpen is it's lights out, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of what I see too.
So yeah, that'll pretty much do it for this episode. It was a very long-winded conversation, but still very, very good to break down the trade market fully. It'll be interesting. I wish Jesus Luzardo was available, but he's not, unfortunately.
I think that we're going to see a lot of really big moves this year. I think that now it's a pitcher's league, obviously an offensive league, but you want to win, you need to go out and get your starting pitching, your relief pitching, your closer, whoever that may be, and that'll put you in the best position to win. So I think if it were up to me, there's going to be a lot of really, really good pitchers available.
I think so. Like you said, it's going to be a pitcher's market, and teams who are not in a position to compete should just sell pitchers because it's the price is going to escalate pretty quickly. So that'll do it for this episode. Everything you need is in the description as always. Thank you, Noah, for taking the time on me on the ballpark. You're welcome back if you want to come back on the show. So with that, we'll see you next time.